So welcome back to the second half of Cambridge Inside Out. Today is September 3rd, 2024. Um, and again, so for the last half hour, sort of talking about the vacancy on the city council created by the passing, the very untimely passing of Joan Pickett. And you know, and Yeah, and maybe I'll just say one other thing. I didn't particularly appreciate the Harvard Crimson article. Who basically didn't. I mean, you could, they're just students, right? So, who basically tries to distill a whole human being who's has many skills and many interests and many things to contribute and past contributions, and basically wrote her off as the bike lane lady. The one who was opposed to some of the bad bike lane. And by the way, just to say this, because I've talked to Joan about this quite a bit. Joan wasn't opposed to bike lanes. Joan was opposed to badly engineered bike lanes and the refusal to take into account a lot of the other considerations before simply plowing ahead with bike lanes, whether they're good or bad or whatever. And I don't know about you, but I can certainly attest to the fact that some of the bicycle lanes that have been engineered are really pretty terrible. Some of them are very good. Certainly the grade separated ones along Western Avenue and the ones on River Street to come, I think would be very, very good. Um, but when I was riding out through West Cambridge in a car a couple days ago, I just took a note at all those little low concrete curbstones that they have like right next to the road. And I could see tire marks where cars have basically been hitting them regularly, probably weren't reporting them. They just bounced off of them, but you can see the rubber on those things because the travel lanes, you can say what you want about road diets and traffic calming and whatever, but if the roads are just a little too small so that you actually feel like you're in danger of a head-on collision, um, then maybe you really have to rethink some of these things, and again, I had a conversation with somebody earlier today who just simply read from the bike lane catechism about how everything the city does is perfect and shut up and don't criticize, because if you do, you're a bad person. So Joan was a very good person, but she did have a different point of view about traffic safety, bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, and I'm glad that she represented us on the Cambridge City Council, and I hope Kathy Zusi will represent us just as well. Now, another matter I think it probably deserves a little bit of attention is the fact that today was a party primary. Now, I got to say, I voted. I guess I got my little sticker here that says I voted. I am one of 77 people in the city who have not missed a single citywide election since 1997. I ran into another one of them today. We decided we should make T-shirts, super voters, right? Um, but I got to say, when you go to a vote of a party primary, if you were a libertarian, you would go there. There would be nothing on the ballot. There would be no candidates even. If you were a Republican, there would be virtually none. In fact, let me see if maybe I can actually show you a little bit here. Right. So there were various things on the ballot, senator in Congress, representative in Congress. Uh, and anyway, as you can see here, if you happen to be registered libertarian and you chose to vote, you'd get a blank ballot with absolutely no choices. I suppose you could write in some names if you wanted to, but that's how lacking the Libertarian Party is in this state. If you're a Republican, the only choices you would have would be for the seat, the senator seat currently occupied by Elizabeth Warren, where there were three people contesting that. So I guess that's something, right? Now, as a Democrat, there was really, I mean, I can say that on my ballot, because I was in the 6th district of the Governor's Council, it was Terry Kennedy, right? So, and then I'm also in the 26th Middlesex Representative District. I didn't have a single choice at all on my ballot. Everybody's running unopposed. Now, maybe there'll be candidates in the November election, but probably not. I mean, we were in a really dreadful situation in terms of representative democracy when in fact voters, even us super voters who go out to vote to do what we feel is appropriate, and we have absolutely no choices. So, so, so this year, I actually wrote in a couple. I mean, actually, I'll just say because I thought it was fun, was for the I will never vote for Mike Connolly as a state representative, nor should anyone else. But he runs unopposed because nobody's interested in sticking their neck out and getting beat up by being a candidate around here anymore. So I just wrote in my own name. That'll at least give a few yucks to the people at the election commission when I get one or two votes maximum. But anyway, it's a pathetic situation when you actually want to be a good voter and vote and you have no choices at all. And again, we'll certainly have some very substantial choices in the November election, presidential election being perhaps the most significant of all of them. But in many of the other races, congressional races, I imagine, I don't think Ayanna Pressley's going to have an opponent from the Republicans. If um, I, who knows, right? So certainly there was nobody on the ballot, so I guess somebody could stage a write-in or something like that. So we just say that I don't know I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I can say that in Massachusetts, our democracy is not in good shape. Unless there are credible candidates willing to actually stick their neck out and responsible people, including people in journalism or people who pretend to be journalists, who are willing to act as marshals instead of keeping a fair and balanced playing ground, for candidates to comfortably be candidates, without being brutalized. Until that happens, don't you shouldn't be expecting anything wonderful in terms of elections. So anyway, so that we vote, we do our thing, and even if it's only seems to be for the sake of retaining your super voter status, which honestly, that's the only thing I really got out of voting today, was the fact that I now have an unbroken streak of many, many, many elections. You know, and I'm one of the 77, and I'm sure that maybe we one or two fewer after today. It's interesting, of the 77 super voters, I know 39 of them. But then again, I've been around for a while, and I'm getting older too. And obviously, if you're below a certain age, you wouldn't have even had the opportunity to vote since 1997. So I don't mean to slight them. Perhaps what I'll do is I'll sort of run through the database and pull out the people who haven't missed an election since 2010 or something like that. But anyway, it's kind of a fun thing to just goof around with. So I thought maybe what I'll do is I'll just sort of step through a few other things that are, kind of current. All right. So anyway, the election, is over. Well, it's not over. It's actually, you can still vote until 8 o'clock if you still haven't. Maybe I will say one thing is that there was one very contested race for the 25th Middlesex Representative District between Marjorie Decker and Evan MacKay, or Mackay. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce his name. But, I've been, getting the Marjories. I don't get it, actually. I find these outside because I'm actually not in the district. But, there's MacKay and there's Marjorie Decker. And, again, the Cambridge Day is really turning into sort of the dartboard of local news, where advocates for Evan MacKay just basically are allowed to just post seemingly unlimited numbers of attack articles against Marjorie Decker, and then people just basically piss all over each other in the comments section. Almost all of whom are anonymous commenters. And I've been looking at that, and I went to there was a Cambridge Democratic City Committee put together a forum with the two candidates. It wasn't a head-to-head debate. Basically, Marjorie answered a few questions, gave her spiel, and then MacKay followed. And again, I don't want to beat up anybody here, but MacKay has basically he's just a kid who's been living 9 years in Harvard housing. His only claim to fame is that he was involved with helping put together this auto workers union as a unionization of graduate students at Harvard, which is something that's been happening in a few other places. He's a gung-ho democratic socialist, which means I have no use for democratic socialists for a lot of reasons. Many of you will know why, because I think that they are crude and disreputable people. And I will say let me just say a thing about Marjorie Decker. When I first knew Marjorie Decker, I didn't like Marjorie, and we used to fight and get mean to each other. But I will say that she was probably one of the most impassioned political players I've ever met in Cambridge, and still is. And she's held true to her values and to her roots. She grew up in public housing. And I know sometimes that sounded like a broken record, just another one of those things you say in your campaign literature. But she did grow up in public housing, and her parents were not wealthy, or they were, she did not come from the easiest of backgrounds. And she developed into a hell of a good political player for the city, working in a legislature which is pretty dysfunctional by pretty much all accounts, and getting through what you can, doing what you got to do to sort of make things happen. So, there's a chance in a low voter turnout election, if all the crazy advocates come out here and want to vote for their person, you could turn a good incumbent out. It's a possibility. So I just hope that the longtime supporters of Marjorie actually did come out to vote, and so that there isn't some weird anomaly. Honestly, the last thing we need is another socialist in the state legislature. They are do-nothings. They accomplish nothing. They scream and yell, and weren't for Twitter and social media, they'd be otherwise invisible and forgotten. So anyway, so that was today, and I guess we'll find out what the results are either tonight, probably tonight, because I suppose there's the provisional ballots, which will be relatively few. They will adjudicate those tomorrow, and then and then the results will be known. So anyway, having said my piece about that, and again with my hope that Marjorie is returned to her position. By the way, I actually didn't want to speak too much about this up until this point, because people who despise me would be the ones who would then try and malign Marjorie based on me, and I didn't want that. So I've just been talking more privately. Now, something actually I enjoyed last year was something called Meet Your Neighbor Day. And this is organized by the Peace Commission and Brian Corr, whose sister just passed away, by the way. So, please think good thoughts to Brian Corr from the Peace Commission. So, you can put in an application to host one of these up until tomorrow, unless they ease the deadlines, whatever. And then I just hopped, it was like a bee going from flower to flower last year, just visiting some of these little block parties, that got some support. And it was actually quite a lot of fun, especially in Cambridgeport. So maybe you should know about that. One of the things that's been kind of remarkable for me is, again, maybe this is just the inclination of our current city manager, Yan Huang, that they've been really having a pretty robust procedure in the filling of vacancies on Cambridge boards and commissions. They've just recently finished the deadline passed for the Harvard Square and Central Square advisory committees, but there are actually still eight ones where I guess the deadline for 4 of them is next Monday. But they are free. If you're interested in serving on the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority board, that's a big job. Foundry Advisory Committee, Cambridge Commission on Immigrant Rights and Citizenship, the Cambridge Street Working Group. Yes, that is related to bike lanes, but not exclusively bike lanes. Cambridge Veterans Advisory Committee, the formerly known as the Kids Council, is now called the Cambridge Family Policy Council, the Human Rights Commission, and the Cambridge Citizens Committee on Civic Unity. So there's there's a lot going on, and if you are the kind of person who's inclined to be a good dude, be a good citizen, and actually put in some time and serve on a board, I always say it's the best education that money can't buy. The thing is, if you feel underprepared, don't worry about it. If you're a good person and you can work well with others, then you should consider doing it anyway, because you'll learn a lot, and then before you know it, I mean, I can speak as a firsthand experience here. Before you know it, you will find yourself having a tremendous amount of expertise in some areas for having served on one of our city boards and commissions, right? For me, the very first one was actually a mayoral appointment to a water and sewer advisory board back in the 1980s, and I learned everything really that you would want to know about or could know about the Cambridge water system. And I've been sort of I would call myself an aqua evangelist ever since. So if I just urge people, if you have some time, to consider it. I think it's definitely something worth doing. Um, there are a number of other things. Actually, one thing maybe I'll do another screen share and say about here, because I think it's actually kind of a remarkable thing. Is So the Cambridge has been putting together this pre-K initiative for some time, and now, I mean, this is like first day of school is today. And so they've got their first group of people enrolled in this pre-K program. So there are actually 777 Cambridge children enrolled, 528 of them being 4-year-olds and 249 3-year-olds in these programs across 61 Cambridge preschool sites for the 2024-2025 year. And there's a lot more other information about this. This is not a cheap program. I mean, this is a $34 million commitment from the city to make this happen, but it's something that has been promised for a good long while, and it's now finally coming into fruition. And it's interesting how, even though it's just starting up for this year, they're already announcing that the deadline for applying for the 25-26 school year, you should apply during the month of October. So it's coming up soon, right? Another thing it's some of you hopefully will find out about, not in the worst way, is the pilot program for street. We used to, don't no parking on the odd side of the street or your car will be tagged and towed, right? We all have heard the siren sound. But as of last year, they did a pilot program where the city chose to not tow, but just to give within $50 tickets. And apparently, there's enough people in Cambridge have enough money to burn that they said, $50, $50. So they just leave their car parked. They don't even worry about it. And it was really a pain for the public works people to get around the parked cars. They were using leaf blowers and whatever. And I can say, in fact, I'm just going to step out and say here, I can say from personal experience that the storm drains were a lot more clogged this past year because of a lot of that extra debris that was just too difficult to get because of the moving of the cars. Well, they're not going to start towing again. At least they're not planning to start towing again, but they did increase the fine from $50 to $100, which actually required a home rule petition to do that, because there has to be a matching of costs to purpose. So you can't just jack up the fine because you want to, yell at people, or threaten people. So there has to be a connection. So it took home rule legislation to actually make that happen. So anyway, that started, first of this month. So maybe $100 will convince you that you shouldn't leave your car parked on the wrong side of the street when it's time to do the street cleaning. So anyway, so that's something that's sort of coming around. And just to say a few things that have occurred over this past month. I mean, I always like to promote the Oldtime Baseball game that happens up at St. Peter's Field every August. There's a lot of people involved in putting it together, but Steve Buckley, sports writer for the Boston Herald, is really kind of like one of the main forces behind it. So it happened on August 22nd, and it was a great time. And it was actually kind of a fun game to be at. And I got to meet Steve's siblings. It was kind of great actually talking with Bill and his sister as well. But they always have Lou Merloni, former Red Sox player. He's been playing most every year, but the featured guest this time was Jonathan Papelbon, who, because he was caught up in an airport, he wasn't there at the start of the game, and people were wondering whether he would show. So I was going around going, he's a relief pitcher. He's only going to be here for the late innings. And sure enough, he showed up in the later innings. And when he was there, he was actually kind of spectacular. Everybody wanted to be photographed with Jonathan Papelbon. It's actually this one photo. I'd love to see the photo, where it was like about 6 or 7 Cambridge police officers lined up posing with Jonathan Papelbon, you know. But he came in and he pitched 1 inning. He just pitched 1 inning, and I think it was somebody he knows was there batting, so he just lobbed in and he hit a batter, and then the batter just charged the mound. It was all for fun, of course. So provided a little bit of comedy during the game. But it's always a great time. I got to spend time talking at length with Marjorie Decker, Anthony Galluccio, my good friend Glenn Kuchar, Karen Costco. A lot of people. It's really like a reunion. It's not just a baseball game. It really is very much like a big reunion. So anyway, so that was on August 22nd, and we had really excellent weather, and it was really a great time for everybody. Um, One of the things, and I only briefly mentioned it at the start of tonight, is that, there was a August 5th city council meeting where one of the topics, there were several orders that grew out of a government operations committee about having to do with the charter process, charter review, charter revision process, which is still ongoing, where it was a vote basically to only consider recommendations that got a 2/3 vote from the Charter Review Committee before looking at other proposals that city councilors might just throw in the bucket on the fly. And so that passed. And then there was a vote to basically it was to be an understanding that the only when they do finally get around sometime within this, maybe next year, when they finally get around to um, putting together a package of things that would be the new Cambridge Charter, which hopefully won't be too different than what we have right now. That only things that have 2/3 support from the council should be forwarded, which I agree with. I think this is a matter too large to be determined by simple majorities and personal interests of individual councilors. You need a lot more consensus for something this important. But that was hung on a 4-4-1 vote because Joan Pickett was absent and later died. In a perfect world, city councilors would allow Joan's replacement, Kathy Zusi, to and redo that vote and see, and if they want to pass a rule that says that only things with 2/3 vote, a 2/3 vote should be forwarded to the legislature, I think that would be great. Or they can choose not to allow that. Again, it's really their call, it's their option. They're under no obligation to do so. And then we'll see where this goes. This is, I follow the charter review committee every week, or not say every week, but yeah, every time they had meetings, and was aware of what they were doing, what they weren't doing, what was going right, and what was definitely going wrong. And some things definitely went wrong. And but I've always feared that there would come a point where some self-interest from a few individual councilors might come to just getting a bare majority of 5 votes to force something to the voters. Ultimately, the voters will have to vote on it anyway. But the thing is that if you throw in a bad thing as a part of a package, and then the voters approve the package, you could end up adopting a bad thing amongst some good things. And that's my concern. And so we'll have to see where this leads in the days and weeks to come, or really more like months to come, and it will most likely roll into next year. But anyway, I think everybody should put it on the radar that this is still an important thing, and nothing has been settled, and I don't want to see anything just sort of being slipped in during the dead of night because everybody had sort of given up interest on the matter. Nothing's been done yet, but something will be done, and you really should be paying some attention to it. One thing, and I probably mentioned this on the previous show, is there had been a city council order, I think in June, wanting to provide some funding for, to support alternative news possibilities, you know, due to the continuing absence of the Cambridge Chronicle. And I do think something should be done about this, but what was proposed was not a very good idea. So I hope that there's at least some conversations, maybe in the Civic Unity Committee or whatever, about ways in which we can enhance local news down the road, so that it's not just the whims of one individual, and it's certainly not something polluted with anonymous commenters, right, who are basically putting elected officials and city government people on trial without any ability to even see who the accuser is. So we got a lot of work to do, and so anyway, I would hope some people will put that also on your radar as something important. Anyway, we're getting down to the last minute here. So I'd say here that, and one last thing I'll mention here is that the process of a request for information, eventually a request for proposals having to do with some um, redevelopment in Central Square is definitely an iron in the fire. There's some serious discussion happening right now about possible zoning changes as well. So for those of you like myself who are very strongly interested in matters involving Central Square, again, as I say, keep it on your radar. It's definitely there. So anyway, it looks like we're just about out of time here. So I'll be back in a couple of weeks here on Cambridge Inside Out.